Vladimir Putin thinks he's going to have it all his own way in Europe. After defeating Ukraine, Russia's leader believes he'll be able to turn his attention to other countries that were once under Russia's control. The Baltic states will fall, so will Finland, and when he's ready, Putin will be able to turn his attention toward Poland. But Poland has other ideas. Poland's massive military build-up is a punch to Putin's face, and if Russia isn't careful, that punch could score a knockout. On June 27, the Defense Post reported on comments made by Poland's foreign minister, Radosław Sikorski. He had a warning to deliver, but it might not be the type of warning one might expect. Rather than telling Putin that Poland is increasing its military might so it can hurt Russia in a future fight, though it is, as will be explained later, Sikorski said that Putin faces a much bigger problem. Russia has gotten itself caught up in an arms race. And if he isn't careful, Putin is going to bankrupt his country by trying to stay ahead of countries like Poland and its NATO allies. Putin should understand that he's on the path of Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev, Sikorski said in June. He himself once said that the Soviet Union collapsed because it spent too much on armament, and now he's doing exactly the same thing. The message is clear. Putin knows that he's sending Russia into an economic black hole with his wartime spending. Russia's leader has pointed out this very issue in the past. Poland is telling Russia that it can't allow Putin's arrogance and desire to restore the Russian Federation to its past glory to consume the country. Sikorski continued, adding, "He's waging a very expensive war and also scared the whole West into reinforcing its defense spending. We're doing it because Putin is threatening us. This means that from an economy the size of Texas, Putin will have to squeeze out even more defense funds. Hopefully with a similar result for the regime to that of the Soviet Union, but faster." And that's where Poland's own military build-up comes into play. Not only is Russia on the brink of bankruptcy thanks to Putin, but the country's military spending has pushed the rest of Europe to renew its focus on building up the continent's assorted military. If Putin is foolish enough to start a wider war, Sikorski warns he won't be facing the same Europe that existed before the Ukraine invasion. His enemy will be reinvigorated, ready, dangerous, and the only way that Russia will be able to compete is to lose itself deeper into an arms race that's already threatening to claim the country. These are bold claims being made by Poland's foreign minister. However, there's plenty of evidence to back them up, starting with Russia's excessive military spending and the impact that Putin's policies are having on the country. The reality Putin doesn't want to face is that his military spending has spiraled out of control. That's the point that the Centre for European Policy Analysis, or CEPA, made in an article written by Pavel Luzin in January 2025. Luzin notes that Putin's planned expenditure and what Russia actually spent in 2024 were very different figures. Officially, Russia dedicated about $101 billion to its military last year, which is already a massive sum. However, the real figure was accidentally revealed by Russia's Minister of Defense, Andrei Belousov, in December. He claimed that defense spending amounted to 32.5% of Russia's 40.6 trillion ruble budget. 32.5% of 40.6 trillion rubles is 13.2 trillion rubles, Luzin said, which at the time translated to a staggering $129 billion. Almost $30 billion more than Putin intended to spend. The spending marked a 13-year high point for Russia. It was also more than double the amount Russia spent in 2022, and around 5 trillion rubles more than its defense spending in 2023. There's a clear pattern here. As the Ukraine war has dragged on for far longer than Putin ever anticipated, Russia's president has had to dig deeper and deeper into the country's collective pocket to find the funds to support his invasion. Other figures showcase how Russia's military spending has spiraled out of control. In October 2024, the new Voice of Ukraine reported that Russia is now at the point where it's spending more on Putin's invasion per week than it spent on 80% of its regions during an entire year. Only 18 of Russia's 83 regions have annual budgets that are larger than the $390.2 million Russia is spending on the war per week. That's another problem for Putin. His inability to see past his desire to end Ukraine's sovereignty is actively hurting the people he claims he's protecting. The everyday Russian is seeing prices increase and inflation soar as Putin spends more of the public purse on his rampaging army. And $390.2 million per week might be a massive underestimate. In February, Euromaidan Press reported that the Kremlin has dedicated 41% of Russia's federal budget to the Ukraine war. According to Ukraine's intelligence chief, Kirill Budanov, that's putting Russia in a position where it's spending close to $1 billion per day on the war. This is an extremely expensive war. A day of war costs slightly less than $1 billion for them. This is a huge amount of money, Budanov said in February. He also pointed out just how much of a negative impact this spending is having on Russia. 41% of budget expenditures is the defense budget. These are abnormal figures. To implement this budget, almost all social programs, medical, educational, were curtailed. The financial and economic impact, negative, on Russia is already noticeable. Whatever the true figure is for Russia's military spending, one thing is for certain. It's too much. Lucin writes in his CIPA article that Russia can't maintain this high level of spending for much longer without utterly devastating the Russian economy. He labels 2025 Russia's year of truth, noting that Russia's weakened private sector isn't able to pick up the economic slack to support its ailing economy. That forces the Kremlin to use taxes, fees, fines and tariffs to maintain war spending and procurement, Lucin said. A vicious cycle is created. The more Putin spends, the more he has to use these types of measures to generate revenue, which further hurts an already struggling Russian populace. Just like his military spending, these measures can't go on forever before that populace turns against him or Putin simply bankrupts the country. And it's not like Russia isn't already feeling the economic pinch thanks to Putin's war. First, some good news for Russia. Trading Economics says that the country's annual inflation rate fell for the third straight month in June. The bad news? A fall doesn't mean much when that rate is 9.4%, which is far higher than Putin wants it to be. Russia's annual inflation has been above the 9% mark since December 2024 and cracked the 10% mark in February, March and April. This is a dire situation for Russia's people, who are having to spend more than ever on everyday goods. It's also not great for the Russian military. Inflation means that parts and equipment cost more. Putin is also having to pay more to his contracted soldiers. When budgetary issues are already such a major problem, Putin literally can't afford to have rampant inflation raising his military expenditures even higher. To compound the inflation issue, Russia's base interest rate is 20%. That's a problem for both its people and its businesses, both of which are struggling to borrow money due to the insane repayments they have to make. There's also the Russian financial reserves issue to consider. In June, the Foreign Intelligence Service of Ukraine revealed that the liquid portion of Russia's reserve fund has dropped from $145 billion in July 2022 to just $39 billion as of May 1, 2025. Underfunding of domestic projects also runs rampant in Russia, the service claims, and Goldman Sachs says that Russia's annual gross domestic product, or GDP growth rate, has dropped from 5% to a flat zero. All of this proves Poland's point. To both sustain his Ukraine invasion and ensure that the Russian military can maintain some semblance of a threat to Europe if Russia overcomes Ukraine, Putin is bleeding his country dry. And it gets worse. Even with all of this spending, Russia is still struggling to modernize its military to the point where it achieves parity with Poland and the other Western nations Putin so desperately wants to threaten. That's according to consulting fellow of the Russia and Eurasia program at Chatham House, Matthew Buleg. He said in July that a combination of sanctions, the attritional effects of the Ukraine war, and innovation stagnation are all weakening Russia's capabilities. Despite Russia's record levels of military spending, our research shows that the current state of its military industry is one of regression, contrary to what the Kremlin would have the world believe, Buleg adds. Production will likely have to be simplified and slowed over the coming years, while Russia will be forced to accept reduced quality of outputs and will suffer from innovation stagnation in its technological research and development. Translation: Russia is spending more than ever before on military hardware that's a long way behind the global curve. Russia's military build-up isn't delivering the way Putin needs it to deliver. It's also costing far more than Russia can afford. And Putin knows it. That's why he's announced at the end of June that he plans to reduce military spending next year and the year after over the next 3-year period, amidst concerns over Russia's economy. Just how much those reductions will be and the impact they'll have on Putin's Ukraine invasion are yet to be seen. But the very fact that they have to be made only further proves Sikorsky's point that Putin is spending Russia into economic oblivion. All of this is already a painful slap to Putin's face. He's struggling massively with his country's economy, and Poland knows it. However, the punch comes from the fact that as all of these struggles are happening, Poland is getting stronger than ever before. It's taking advantage of Russia's increasing weakness by building a military force that will make Putin think twice about any invasion he might have planned for after Ukraine, assuming Russia is even able to topple its current enemy. First, there's spending. As Putin is announcing that Russia is going to be forced to spend less on its military over the next few years, Poland is increasing its defense budget. In February, Euronews reported that Poland is planning to spend 4.7% of its GDP on its military in 2025. While that's less than Russia in pure numbers, as Poland will invest about $35 billion into its defense during the year, compared to well over $100 billion in Russia, it's indicative of a nation that's going through a military build-up. It's also part of a pattern. The 4.7% spending means that Poland is now dedicating more of its GDP to its military than any other NATO nation. And it's been hitting high numbers for a while. In 2024, Poland spent 4.1% of its GDP on its military. According to The Week, Poland is also focused on strengthening its military in terms of pure numbers. Back in 2014, the country had NATO's 9th largest armed forces. Now it's the 3rd, and it's hit that high mark by tripling its spending and doubling the number of personnel in its army over the last decade. Russia is the clear reason for this military build-up. And Poland wants to make sure that Putin knows it. The country has spent over a decade transforming itself into a formidable adversary for Russia. However, the acceleration truly began in 2022 with the introduction into law of Poland's Homeland Defense Act. That act opened the door for Poland's massive spending increases, which The Week says include $60 billion invested into US-made equipment, including 96 helicopters and the Integrated Battle Command System. That system allows radars, missile launchers, and defense systems to coordinate, making it ideal when faced with an enemy that's shown how much it loves conducting missile and drone strikes against cities in Ukraine. Poland has also joined the European Sky Shield initiative, The Week says, which is a massive plan to create an air defense system across Europe akin to Israel's Iron Dome. Even back in September 2023, SIPA was claiming that Poland had transformed itself into a defense colossus. That article came off the back of the previous year when Poland spent 2.4% of its GDP on defense. By 2023, it was spending around 4%, and 2025 is projected to nearly double its 2022 numbers. All of this military build-up will already terrify Putin. But there's another reason why Russia should be scared of Poland and the knockout punch it's delivering directly to its face. Poland is paying attention to how Ukraine is combating Russia's forces. That means it's learning lessons that Putin doesn't want Poland to learn, especially when it comes to the effectiveness of drone warfare. In May, DSEI Gateway News reported that Poland is working on building an entire army of drones to go alongside the rest of its military build-up. It reported that Poland's Deputy Prime Minister, who's also its Minister of National Defense, Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz, had met with about 40 companies inside Poland. His intent was simple and clearly stated: a desire to build an army consisting of hundreds of thousands of drones and the ability to produce millions, Kosiniak-Kamysz added. In all domains, in all units, every soldier of the Polish army will have contact with drones. This is our ambition. This is our goal. We see what's happening in Ukraine. Poland isn't hanging around. On July 23, Militani reported that the Polish Ministry of Defense had already earmarked $55 million of investment into the large-scale purchase of drones for the country's armed forces. Around half of that money will go toward buying drones, with the other half being spent on training a new fleet of drone operators. And that's just the beginning. By the fall of 2025, Militani says Poland expects to have 90 units of new equipment delivered to its military units so they can engage in real-world testing. These 90 units are being pulled from 455 proposals that have been submitted to the country's Ministry of Defense, more than 100 of which cover unmanned systems. Poland is also in the process of building drone laboratories that will allow it to use innovative 3D printing techniques to mass-produce drones cost-effectively. Poland's drone investment shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody who's been paying attention to the Ukraine war. One of the reasons that Ukraine has been able to defend itself against Putin's massive military is that it's innovated constantly on the drone warfare front. That innovation has forced evolution in the conflict to the point where Army Technology notes that drones are now responsible for between 70 and 80% of the casualties occurring in Ukraine. Think about what that means for Putin. He's demonstrated that he has no plan B when it comes to Russia's approach to an invasion. Russia relies on bigger numbers. It always has. So if Putin does ever invade Poland, he's now going to be faced with a much larger army than he would have had to deal with before he launched his Ukraine invasion. And that army is going to be equipped with hundreds of thousands, perhaps even millions, of the very weapons that Ukraine has used to inflict over 1 million casualties and counting on Russia. The point here is simple. Poland is prepared for Putin. That preparation is perhaps the juice behind the punch that Poland has delivered to Putin with its military build-up. When Russia invaded Ukraine, Putin caught almost the entire world unaware. There had been rumblings that an invasion might be possible. Russia even fed into this, with its Deputy Foreign Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sergei Ryabkov, telling the US a little over a month before the invasion that there are no plans or intentions to attack Ukraine. Of course, Ryabkov was lying through his teeth. Putin won't be able to get away with that approach if he tries to invade Poland. The Polish military is already ready, and it will make life hell for any Russian soldiers who try to cross its borders. The attritional war that's already so badly damaged Russia's military in Ukraine will only continue in Poland, and it will continue while Russia's economy is crippled and Poland continues to build up its military. And that's the real warning that Sikorsky was delivering to Putin on June 27. Start a fight against Poland at its own peril because Russia is in no position to win. And as if all of that wasn't warning enough, there's also one more thing that Putin has to consider. Poland is a NATO member. As a NATO member, Poland is protected by Article 5 of the NATO Charter. That article duty binds every NATO member to come to the direct defense of any other member that faces an attack from an aggressor on its own territory. So, not only would Putin's forces be dealing with a resurgent Poland at a time when Russia's economy and military are on the verge of crumbling, but they'll also be dealing with 31 other NATO members, including major military powers like the United States, Germany, France, and the United Kingdom. And just like Poland, many of those members have drastically increased their defense spending since Russia invaded Ukraine. By July 2024, 23 of the 32 NATO members were hitting NATO's then recommended target of 2% of GDP spent on defense. In 2024 alone, NATO members spent 18% more on their defense than they did in 2023, with NATO as a collective spending 2.71% of its GDP on defense, says the Atlantic Council. And more is coming. In June, NATO announced a new plan that will see it recommend that all of its members commit 5% of their GDPs to defense spending by 2035. That 5% is broken down into 3.5% for core defense expenditure and 1.5% on critical infrastructure and civil preparedness, among other things. But the point here is that more money is going to come pouring into NATO's militaries right when Putin is having to pull money out of his army for fear of bankrupting his country. Ultimately, money lies at the heart of Putin's new Poland problem. The punch to the face he's just received is a reminder that he can't keep up Russia's military spending forever. And even with that record-breaking spending, the war of attrition in Ukraine has left Russia weaker, both in tangible terms and when it comes to the global perception of Russia's strength. By contrast, Poland is only getting stronger, and the same goes for its NATO allies. Russia might still win in Ukraine, but if it does, Poland and its allies are now more than ready for whatever comes next. But Poland is the least of Putin's concerns right now. His military is still mired in a seemingly never-ending war in Ukraine, and things aren't going well. Ukraine has just ripped out Russia's eyes and shattered its shield in a devastating strike on its air defenses. Find out more in our video, and remember to subscribe to the Military Show if you want to see more videos covering Putin's crumbling army.